Hi, everybody. I'm Walter. I'm the Dutch Mentor. Welcome back to the S.M.A.R.T Performance Podcast, where S stands for self-care, M for mindful growth, A for adaptive problem solving, R for rhythmic operation, T for building that thriving community, and of course, P for performance. Today, we're going to be talking about your personal brand and why you should have a podcast as well. Remember that we always want to start off with understanding our true why, but our personal brand is a really close second to that. And I'm really happy to have Tom with me today. Tom, introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'm Tom Fox. I live in the hill country of West Texas. I have founded two podcast networks. One is a large B2B podcast network, the Compliance Podcast Network, the only podcast network in legal and regulatory compliance, founded in 2017. I've been podcasting since 2012. And I have a smaller regional, rural-focused podcast, the Texas Hill Country Podcast Network, which focuses on the people, places, and things of the Texas Hill Country.
That sounds really good. So let's dive right into that question. Why podcasting and why is branding so very important to each one of us?
Sure. So I talk, speak, teach at law schools and other business schools, and I always have a class on the brand of you. In 2026, it's very different than when you and I started in the workforce. I mean, we both started at a time where you could still stay with one company for a career, or certainly you could make a move or two. If you made many moves, people thought there was something wrong with you. Why did they move? Why did their company let them go, et cetera? Well, that has completely changed. My daughter graduated from college in, I think, 2023. Within 18 months, she had 5 jobs and nearly tripled her salary. So I concluded whatever I knew was no longer valid. Because after her second move, I said, you cannot move under any circumstances, period, end of story, for at least a year. She showed me. And so that's a way of introducing the topic of the brand of you. And one of the most influential descriptions of a brand is the following. I'm an avid reader of mysteries and thrillers, and there's a guy named James Patterson who writes mysteries and thrillers. He wrote Alex Cross and numerous other books. And I watched a series about writing by him, and he talked about your brand. And this is what he said, and I hope this shows up on the video, which is he put his hand out as if he was shaking my hand. He said, that's your brand. Your brand is your promise. And for me, and James Patterson, my promise to you is I'm going to deliver to you a mystery or thriller. Now, I can deliver a rom-com, but I have to tell you I'm going to do that because my promise to you is you're going to get a mystery or thriller. Another colleague named Jeffrey Hazlett says a brand is a promise delivered. And so I think about that as trying to think through my own personal brand. And that leads me to podcasting. I'm obviously very passionate about podcasting. It is my full-time job now. But I try to communicate and educate businesses and business leaders on why they need a podcast. There are 5 types of podcasts for businesses and business leaders. Number 1, thought leadership. 2, audience engagement. 3, client or customer relationship. 4, sales. And 5, content creation. They all have similar characteristics, but all have a little bit different focus. And one thing I learned very early in podcasting is I'm a lawyer by professional background. And if I emailed or called a client, said, my name's Tom Fox, I'd like to talk to you about my legal services in this area, I might or might not get a response. If I email and say, my name is Tom Fox, I have a podcast in legal and regulatory compliance, I would like you to come on and talk about you. I got 100% positive response to that. No one will say no if you say, just come on and talk about you. Well, now I've got a relationship with that person. The thought leadership part, as a lawyer, I'd always written a lot of papers. I found that writing papers was a great learning tool for me, and it gave me expertise in subject matter areas I might have been outside my typical area. And the podcasts were a natural extension of that. And I said I started that in 2012. Audience engagement. This story, it still amazes me. In 2018, 2 women came up to me at a compliance and conference that said to me, we think you need diversity on your podcast network. You have no women podcasters. I looked at them and I said, you're right. When are you going to start your podcast? And they said, no. That's not what we meant. I said, that's what is going to happen, girls, or probably said ladies. And they started a podcast, Great Women in Compliance. And they did two brilliant things. One was they took the name, Great Women in Compliance, and compressed it down to an acronym, GWIC. And then they started a LinkedIn page. Well, at this time, in 2018, there was no group for women in compliance. The compliance field has been about 30 years old, but there was no sort of group for women, support group, any kind of group. And women flocked to their podcast because it was 99.99% women on their podcast. But the brilliance was the LinkedIn community they created. And they got a lot of engagement through that. Well, the first year after the pandemic, they were so successful at a major compliance conference, they were asked to do a panel on it. That panel was so oversubscribed, the next year they were asked to do a 3-hour workshop on it. Well, the third year, that workshop was so oversubscribed, they created a full 2-day conference, Women in Compliance. And I say those women changed the world. They changed the world for women. They changed the world for compliance. And it started out as a podcast. And simply it was starting off, Tom, you need diversity. So you can create audience engagement in a way that you can't with others. Many people are afraid to say, well, I can't sell on a podcast. And, they think it's O.J. Simpson and an infomercial about Italian shoes or something like that. And I was producing a podcast for a client, a branded podcast, and a company owner was interviewing a client of hers. And they were going along, and the client said something like, I'm just having trouble with this one bit of functionality. I really needed to do X instead of Y. And without missing a beat, she said, that's in development. It's going to go live next week. I'll call you with the update and price uplift. And she did it in a way that I just thought, that was the most brilliant sales pitch I've ever heard. Client said, I got a problem. She goes, I got a solution. And she did it within the context of the conversation. So you can sell in a podcast. And then content creation. Most of the work I get, most companies in the compliance space are product companies, software, now AI. There are service companies, law firms, consulting firms, et cetera, but largely products. And they are 50 to 150 million. They're big enough to have a CMO, but they're not big enough to have a content creator. So I create content for them. And the brilliance of a podcast is with one 15-minute or 20-minute or 30-minute podcast, you can create 15 pieces of social media marketing content, videograms, audiograms, LinkedIn posts, blog posts, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever you want, you can create innumerable pieces. And so I have a package I offer of a 5-part podcast series. And I say, what you're going to get is 50 pieces of evergreen compliance content branded with your company brand that'll be good for at least 6 months. And so many companies will come to me and do one of these series kind of once a quarter or once every 6 months, and then they have content created. Actually, many companies have realized now they can create their own content, so I don't get maybe it's called as much, but it's still the same. It's content. Yeah. And being on social media and for a business, being on LinkedIn is absolutely critical. And, I still scroll LinkedIn multiple times a day, and I connect with people multiple times a day who I find interesting, have an interesting story and an interesting tool. So that content creation is equally valid. And you can use one or all of those strategies throughout with the podcast. And the key, though, is let's go back to James Patterson. My promise to you is I'm going to give you a podcast. It's going to be on this topic. I'm going to release it once a month, twice a month, 4 times a month. It doesn't matter. Whatever my promise to you is, on the first Tuesday of each month, you're going to get a Tom Fox podcast on this topic. And then you can increase the cadence of your podcast. It's very difficult to decrease the cadence is I think it's very difficult to have a once a month or once a quarter unless it's a special podcast. I worked with a woman once who did compliance bestsellers, where she would read the book, interview the author, and then have a separate part of her podcast, which was a kind of a book review with others. And it took her some time to do that, but it was very comprehensive. It was very detailed. It was very popular, even though she only did it quarterly, and she got great numbers from that. So the key is to set your cadence and then honor that cadence going forward.
Listen, I love this. I think there's something that I've adopted for myself. That's part of the reason why I do the Smart Performance podcast. So let me ask you a question. So organic growth, right? So personal brand is exceptionally important, and you have to represent yourself at all times, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And you can destroy it just as much quicker than you can ever build it, so to speak. But getting an audience, right? So organic growth in a podcast where there is already a million other podcasts out there is very difficult. What is your thought on getting people established with the podcast so they find a rhythm, but then use some outside help in order to be able to put your podcast out there? So, for example, I grew my podcast to, let's say, 2, 3, 4, 500 followers. Then I engaged with a marketing director, and we have grown it now to 100,000 downloads and 5,000 followers across on a couple of different platforms. What's your thought behind that? What would you tell somebody who starts out and how to grow an audience?
So you are only limited by your imagination.
Mm-hmm.
And that imagination includes what's your reach. When I started, there was something called an IAB certified download, which meant a platform was IAB certified and you had a 1-minute listen to a podcast after it was downloaded. Well, I knew I was never going to have, and the magic number was 30,000 downloads a month to get advertising dollars. I knew I was never going to have a compliance podcast for 30,000, but I thought maybe I could have one at 3,000. And if I could have one, maybe I could have 10. And then I got 30, and then I get advertising dollars. Well, that wasn't quite true. But what I discovered was it's not downloads. It's not impressions. It's not listens. It's not engagements. It's all of that. So to the point where in 2025, my network had 440,000 downloads with a 30 to 60 second listen. I had 7.2 million hits of engagement across the entire network. Now that is IAB certified, non-IAB certified. That's LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. All of those numbers are available to you. It took me years to crack the code on those numbers, but they're publicly available in your account and you can get those. And so you need to, quit thinking about organic growth. Quit thinking about, oh my God, my downloads are 33. Yeah, well, except that you have 50 pieces of content that you're sending out. And that 15-second clip that you think is the best part of your interview with Walter, you've sent to a client and they go, I want to find out more. And is that engagement? I would say yes.
Of course.
So, newsletters, emails, all of that goes into, and think about the reach you have with your podcast, but with the assets you create. And so it's exponentially greater. And I mean, to this day, I still get, how many downloads did we get, Tom? We posted yesterday. Like, stop it. Don't even waste my time with that question. First of all, one day is not enough to give you valid numbers. But a couple of times it's happened. So I hit a home run on a day that, I couldn't explain it. But wait at least a week, see if the numbers are consistent with your other podcasts. And I say within 20 or 30%. But think about the entire reach you have. LinkedIn impressions are as important a measure of engagement as probably as your podcast numbers are, simply because that's where the business folks are. That's where you and I are. That's where all of this is. So that would be my answer to that question.
I love it. Thank you very much. And I think that really adds value. So from an action standpoint, because it's important for me to give that to the audience. So tell us what action steps somebody should take to start a podcast in a meaningful way.
I'm going to try to be as articulate as I can. And here's the answer. Get off your duff and start a podcast. That's it.
So
I bought all the cool toys. I've got a huge infrastructure. I don't have my iPhone here in front of me, but that's all you need is an iPhone. Start. Just start. Your experience may be different, but I look at my podcasts from 2012 and I cringe. I can't even watch them now. I was so bad, but I learned. And every podcast is a learning opportunity. People ask me, tell me all the mistakes you made. I'm like, well, with one exception, I've never made a mistake, because it's been a learning and growth opportunity. If I did a bad interview, whose fault was that? Mine. If I wasn't prepared, whose fault was that? Mine. If I had crappy audio, whose fault was that? Mine. All of those, I've learned from them. Now, the mistake I made, but I only made it once, and everyone is like this, forgot to hit the record button. And I learned now, even when you're recording me, I'm watching the number to make sure it records on. So, but you only make that mistake once, and we've all done it. So it's okay.
Exactly. I love the advice, and it is simple. Keep it simple, stupid is really the initiation. I too have gone through now 3 different rebrands of the podcast. I really like what I'm doing right now. It's received, and I'm the testimonial to what it is that you are preaching. Is that yes, I can get to 20, 30, really meaningful pieces out of this on multiple different platforms, and I enjoy too being a guest. So that's not just hosting, but also participating in as a content provider or somebody who can bring an expertise to the table. So put yourself out there. I think it's really, really important to do. Tom, really, really great insight, advice, and I'm grateful for you for being here. Where can people find you?
Sure. So you can reach me at the compliancepodcastnetwork.net. Also, I'm on the Texas Hill Country Podcast, which is .com. You can email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. I'd love to talk to you about compliance. I'd love to talk to you about podcasting. If you're in a rural location, let me tell you about my new rural initiative. Please let me know because I'm very passionate about rural regional podcasts as well. So I'd love to chat and happy to help you walk through the steps to get started. But it's pretty simple.
I love it. Some parting thoughts.
Actually, I think I'm going to steal from you, which is always remember, always be on brand. And 25 years ago, I was in front of a group of senior executives making a presentation, and someone else in our group said, well, we didn't know we were being audited on this presentation. And the CEO said, you're being audited every minute of every day you work at this company. And that stuck with me forever. So you're spot on. You're always being audited. And your brand is your word. It's that simple.
I learned that lesson, by the way, when I went to Disney on a business trip. And you were reminded that every person who works at Disney is not an employee, but actually an actor or an actress. And as long as you are in a uniform, you're always on stage. And people forget that sometimes. You leave work and you're still wearing it. In my world of healthcare, your scrubs and your photo ID, you go to the grocery store and act like an whatever. You're carrying your brand forward, and that is something you have to be mindful about at all times. Tom, I found this to be very insightful. Thank you very much I really enjoyed the conversation. Good luck with both of your podcasts. And to the audience, again, this is, you can listen to this and you can forget about it tomorrow, or you too can take an action step today. And it is that simple. Use AI to get yourself started. Again, don't overcomplicate it by having to buy thousands of dollars worth of equipment. A simple laptop and telephone will get you started. Again, create a brand, something that represents you, and live by it. Make small adjustments, and don't be afraid to fail, right? Fail fast, fail forward. If you want to go to the Apple Store, download the Dutch Mentor mobile app. You can get started in there as well on your journey to become a better version of yourself. Tom, thank you very much for joining me today in conversation, and I look forward to the next session in the future. Have a good day, everybody.